Hello, my friends. My name is Paul, and welcome to A Calm Touch of Fantasy. And I have an interesting review tonight, guys. I am doing The Tale of Two Books, and we are reviewing Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn and Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson. Sharp Objects is one of the worst books I've read this year, and Midnight Tides is one of the best books I've read this year. And I'm going to try to explain the author that made Midnight Tides good respected his characters while the author of Sharp Objects disrespected her characters. Okay, so first off, Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This is a murder mystery about a small town in Missouri. A girl who used to live there that now lives in Chicago has to go back to cover a story about the murder of two young girls. When she lived in this Missouri town called Wind Gap, she had an awful life. She was abused. She was sexually abused. She just had a horrible life. She had an awful mother that just mistreated her terribly. And now she is being sent back to cover a case of two murdered children. Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson is a fantasy book. Now you're thinking, Paul, how can you compare and contrast a fantasy book with a murder mystery? Well, I'm going to try to. So, Midnight Tides is a story about a continent that is far away from all the other continents that the Malazan Book of the Fallen have taken place. It's kind of a little bit of a more standalone-ish book, dealing with their own races on this continent because they're so separated from everybody else. It deals with two opposing factions. One is the Nethari, and the other is the Tist-Idur. And each one of these sides has this group of brothers that are very different from each other, but their personalities and their characteristics and their choices impact the war against each other. And it's all about the great conflict between these two civilizations and all of the supernatural, magical, and warlike things that happen during this huge conflict. Okay, so Sharp Objects. The main character is called Camille. Camille is a very damaged individual. Because of the abuse from her mother, she had to leave Wind Gap and go into a psychiatric hospital. Now, she was able, with the help of a friend, to pull herself together and become a reporter. And then the reporter, her boss, which is her friend that helped her, wants her to go and cover the story of the two missing girls in Wind Gap where she had her serious mental health issues. Camille is a reactive character. She is doing what her boss is telling her to do to go and cover this murder mystery. The brothers in Midnight Tides are proactive characters. There's one brother that is a traitor. There is a group of brothers that all have different types of strengths and weaknesses, and all of these characters choose to do something themselves. They make choices to impact the world around them. Camille is impacted by the world around her. She does not do anything to impact the world. Everyone in this book chooses what they want to have happen, and they all choose based off of the world, based off of their personality, and based off of the circumstances. Camille is at the author's whim. The author does whatever she wants to Camille. And I hate this. I hate when books do this. Camille is trying to figure out what happened to these two girls that were killed and murdered, and she just falls into this horrible pit of desperation and despair, and she tries to please everybody. People start taking advantage of her. She starts getting abused by people. She's being mistreated by people. She has no self-esteem. She even succumbs to peer pressure by her 13-year-old half-sister, which makes no sense. She ends up taking drugs just to help try to figure out something about the case and to get into the good graces of her 13-year-old sister. I was never so angry about a part in a book than I was this. Midnight Tides, on the other hand, these guys are making decisions. They are making mistakes, but some of them are making the right decisions. But the point is, they are making their own decisions. They are impacting the story. The story is not impacting them. Camille is a victim in Sharp Objects. She is being abused, in my opinion, by the author. She starts out at the beginning of this book as somebody that went through these awful things, picked her up her life, and she got things together. She has a job, she's a reporter, and the author decides to put her through the worst experience of her life. She becomes a victim, she becomes reactive, and she does not do anything to really help the situation whatsoever. She only gets hurt more and more and more, and I hate this book. Gillian Flynn created a female character that went from strong to extremely weak, abused, hurt, and a shell of her former self. And I honestly cannot excuse this author for doing this to a character, a female character, and I think it's awful, and I will not be reading any more books about Gillian Flynn just because of how bad this book was. Midnight Tides, on the other hand, was absolutely amazing. The choices that all these characters made came down to this very specific instances where they made a choice and the entire plot conflict changed and everything revolved around their choices. And it was just amazing, and it was just had these very perfect moments where everything came together. Every page before those decisions just stood on top of this decision, and it just made so much sense, and just was an amazing read. I absolutely loved this book. Probably my top 5 books I've read this year. And Midnight Tides, Steven Erikson knows how to respect his characters. Gillian Flynn does not respect her characters. Do not read this book. Read this one. Alright, that was a tale of 2 books and why I hated one and I loved the other. Thanks for watching.